Today we're talking about networking as artists and musicians. And this is going to be a little bit more casual. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And if you have them right now during this little training or afterwards, drop them in and I'd be happy to go in and answer any questions for you. So one of the best things to do is to begin with the end in mind. Where do you want to go? And sometimes we don't know exactly where we want to go, and that's okay. So we will find that as we move along. But we want to think about what is the ultimate direction where you want to go, and then step backwards from there. And it can be helpful along each level from you can think about it like friends and family, then a local level, then a regional level, then a national level, then an international level. On these levels, who are the people that you would like to connect with? So if you can identify who they are and write down their names and then look at where they're hanging out online, that's how we can start getting into those arenas. Now, a higher up person on an international level is unlikely to give you the time of day unless you have something that can show them significant value. And by value, usually that's something that would have a monetary repercussion, because time is money and people are in here to do business, right, with music. But I mean, friends as well. But those are some important things to think about, the bottom line at the end of the day. So some of the things that you can do are to have a spreadsheet and go in and write who you would like to connect with, and then also look at who would be in a subsidiary position to that person that's directly connected. So for example, I like this record label called 4AD. 4AD, they put out St. Vincent, Grimes. I'd have to check, but I think they're doing Big Thief. They're doing all these people that are huge, and they're based in the UK. And so you can research who they put out and then look at the artists that they release music with, and then look at who's managing those artists, who is on their team. And then if there's any way that you could start to backtrack to a smaller level about anyone that you know that's connected in that arena, then go to hang out in those areas. So places that you could hang out with right now, it would definitely be in online groups. There's multiple different online groups for artists and in the business side. And in the online groups, it's always important to provide value so that you're not just promoting any services, but making sure that you can give something. And even if you don't have any advice to give because they're farther along, they're this highly connected record label and artist management agency, and you're an independent artist seeking representation one day in the future. What are you going to give them? Well, you can give them your time and your attention, and even just any sort of like agreement to what they're saying that it'd be validating, but be honest and be real. Other things that are important to note, that it's important to be able to give value to people before asking for any value. So let's talk about a couple books that are really useful. One is a famous networking and connections book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And no, it's not about manipulation. That's not what we're doing. We're empathetic people, and we want to grow in our charisma and connections. And it's important to learn. It's just social skills and people skills. And mainly it's about providing value, listening, and being present in the moment, and seeing how you can help somebody else. And that's a really great book. Another great book is, I have it here, Jeffrey Gidemer's Little Black Book of Connections. Now, I'm going to read you a little something from this book. Just seeing the right here. Hey, Michelle, welcome. So this book I find to be extremely helpful as well. And it talks about not only for the people who you would identify as people that you'd want to align with. It says, who is in your circle at a higher up level and what have you done for them recently? That puts it in perspective, right? So here are some strategies, rules, and guidelines of connecting. I'm going to read a little bit, just a few highlighted points from here. Now, I'm not basing this whole training off of this book, but these are good things to keep in mind. I also have some notes here about other things that I was thinking about as well. But things just like be friendly first. Everything else falls into place. That's true. Protect your self-image in a way that breeds confidence in others. So what is your reputation? And your brand and your reputation are what things people say about you, but when you're not in the room. And do people want to be around you? Your own self-respect and showing self-respect to others. Eye contact. Not in a creepy staring way, but looking at them when you're talking to them. Consistent positive attitude. No one wants to be around a whiner and a complainer. Do not complain and whine. Everyone has problems. Just like look for the solution in a positive way. No, I don't like to be around complainers for sure. No connection is made without some sort of risk. So yes, it's a point where you have to be vulnerable. And this comes down to developing that resiliency within and that self-love and self-worth so that you are going to be rejected because that's just the name of the game in life. And especially in entertainment, you're going to have more rejections than you will have positive results, acceptances, and people don't talk about it, but picture it like an iceberg. The positive results are just above the water, and underneath the water are not just rejections, but overcoming obstacles, etc. It's all about showing up, but not just showing up prepared. So Oprah coined the phrase, luck is preparation meets opportunity. So make sure that you're put together, you have everything that you need, you're confident, you're well-spoken. Even if you don't feel confident, just take a deep breath. I think it's also helpful to relax into the moment and come back to a spiritual perspective that we're all just human beings on this planet orbiting a sun. And putting things like that makes it easier in terms of any stress levels where you have to impress someone or do something at a certain level that would make a big move in your career. So I think keeping that perspective can be helpful. Another principle here is the less you focus on your motive to meet, the more successful the interaction will be. So it's not about what can I get from somebody or what can I give someone. It's like, where are we connecting on a human level? Take a genuine interest in people before you ask them to take a genuine interest in you. Charisma is about listening to people. It's about having them feel like they're the most important person at that moment. And I know for me, sometimes in the past, I used to think, well, I don't have enough bandwidth to be so present with someone and then have another relationship here and be so present with that one, and then another one here and be so present there and balance all of these people and these relationships in my life. With self-development work, that's been helpful, but also the solution always arrives for that as well. The sooner that you can find something in common, the less anxiety will creep in because you can just talk about your shared interests. And also, the higher up the ladder you go, the more cautious people will be about your motives. So keep that in mind and see how they're responding. Are they responding in a favorable way? Or if not, step back and take an honest look with yourself at how you're approaching people. Business can be elusive, but then you can think about it like running a scientific experiment where you are validating a hypothesis. So you're just testing. It's a scientific method. You're testing different approaches. Not like you're going in a strategic way to a networking event or like concert where you're going to be testing this, but it's like you just show up the way that you think is the best way. And then if you're not having a favorable response, then you step back and you look at it as if it were a science. Okay, what actually happened? And even if you take your emotions out of it, what actually happened? And then look at those and be honest with yourself, because you might not like what you're learning about what you're doing, but it's going to help things change to your advantage. Also, your projected image will determine your ability to make a real connection. So how are people referring to you behind your back? Yeah, I mean, this is not about gossip. This is just about like, oh, so-and-so is an awesome person. You know, she writes this amazing music and she's out doing XYZ. That's it. But how are they referring to you? Or they're like, I don't want to do work with that person again. It was a nightmare, right? People judge you by every action you take. You are never going to escape judgment. And one of my mentors says, people are going to talk anyways, whether you do something or don't do something. If you do something, you're going to go, oh my God, look what she's doing. And if you don't do something, like, oh my God, she's not going for her dreams. Sucks like for her and her life. That's sad. Like you can't win. So don't even worry about it. The more haters you have means the more you've made it. Something like that can keep things in perspective sometimes. But you always have to make sure that you have integrity, that you do what you say. I know for me, I have no space for people who don't have integrity. They're not in my life anymore. And I'm only focused on world-class relationships where people do what they're going to say. And provide value. So this is providing as much value, if not more, than what you're expecting or hoping to receive. Sometimes it can feel like, where in the depths of my being am I going to provide value? What do I have to offer? But this is where listening comes into play. And something like a blanket statement ask or question like, how can I help you? Can be annoying to people if it's a blanket statement, and if it's in a context where it shows that you didn't do any research, that you didn't put any time into learning about that person. This is if you're going into a one-on-one situation or you're sending somebody one email. So you want to make sure that if you want to provide value in some way, that you think about what they would want. And then being direct in that way. Are you clear in your communication? Do you have compelling ways for people to connect with you? Are they excited about what you're talking about? Staying in touch is more important than the initial connection. So people always say in sales and also just in life in general, the fortune is in the follow-up. This doesn't matter. I mean, in music as an artist, you're selling yourself as an artist, not selling out, but selling is convincing somebody. But it's not in a manipulative way. It could be convincing someone like, hey, you're feeling sick, you need to go to the doctor. You're selling someone on the idea of going to the doctor if they're like, no, I'm fine, right? And so all of these ideas, the follow-up, the talking to someone, and following up with them and building that long-term relationship. Long-term relationships are planting seeds for the future, and we don't know how they're going to pan out. And we let go of the how. Those are things that we can let go of. Since you don't know who you're going to run into every day, you have to be ready. every day. And it's important, can you make new connections every day? That's a lot to take on, I know it is, but you can think about trying and see if you can devote a few hours per week on building relationships. You could start at 1 hour per week on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, during COVID, right before dinner or right after dinner. And it helps if you can set up a time for yourself just to get organized in what you're thinking and desiring, and then research and find out where these people are and interact with them, and then have a reward for yourself afterwards. But that's just one way to get started that will motivate you. Your present reputation determines your future fate. So it's important that you have integrity, that you show up in a professional way. And that people feel like they can trust you. That just goes hand in hand with integrity. Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Also be real about people's intentions. So you have to look at what relationships are worth it and where you want to go. So there's a saying that your network is your net worth. So who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? And it's not just about like money, but it's about quality of life and relationships. So are you surrounding yourself in relationships with people who are where you want to be? Or are you surrounding yourself in relationships with people who would be in your old self? And it doesn't mean that you have to cut people out. It's just where you're going to spend your focus and your future energy. Now, Tori Archbold is a PR leader in the world. She works with like George Clooney and Drew Barrymore and major companies. She talks about how she became so successful in her business just by meeting up with people regularly. And even with Zoom, it can be on a Zoom meeting or FaceTime. Things like setting aside time per week for 3 connections: one friend, one colleague, and one reach. And see if you can have something, even if it's short, but try to set that up so you have that going on in your life. Now, I know that's a time commitment for sure. I'm not myself currently practicing all of that consistently because it does take getting systems behind the scenes into place to allow yourself that time, because that doesn't have an immediate payoff, and not like we're looking to pay off, because the purpose of what we're doing anyways is to make music and have like beautiful connections with people. But it is something to think about, like all of this effort and energy we're putting into it, are we seeing any results that we're hoping for that are fulfilling and meaningful to us and the other person? Now, traditional networking events are not always effective. Traditional networking events that they say, hey, this is a networking event, they can be. They also can, especially in person, could be worth more time just to stay at home. It'd be worth your time more to stay at home and connect with people online rather than getting ready, going to the place, then being in the place and making sure that you're talking to various people in the room instead of getting trapped in a conversation with one person, excavating yourself from that and then going somewhere else. So, and then going home. So these are things to think about, that it's not just the time at the event and the cost of admission for the event. I mean, they can be, but it really depends on where you're going at an event that says this is a networking event. A lot of networking happens at concerts, at barbecues, like running into people at like friends' parties. That's where a lot of real networking happens. So it's not just about being at one of those networking events and handing a card. Also, on the subject of cards, yes, it is important to have business cards and have something done that's nice. You don't have to spend a ton of money on it, but don't put your phone number on it either. never put your phone number on cards or even in your email signatures, because you don't know, it's important for you to protect your privacy unless you have a work phone. But you can put your email there. But with business cards, what is more important in the music industry now than a business card is your online presence, your Instagram, your Facebook, your social media presence. That is in your website and your music. Those are your calling cards. But on a personal level, your Instagram. Like, you're not going to look for the label manager at 4AD record label at a networking event and pass them your card. They have way too many things to do to really look up your card unless you have a very significant, compelling reason for them to look you up in your card. Nothing, don't get cards, but this is a digital age. So all of this stuff about giving cards was more like in the 80s and 90s kind of mentality. Now, when and if you're giving a card to somebody, it's more about taking another person's card than you giving yours. People don't want to carry extra stuff. They're minimalist and they just collect stuff. They're not even going to look at it. They're just going to throw it away. Unless it's a really cool card or they have a reason to keep it. And if you want to be on your game, you get their information so that you can reach back out and contact them, and you have some semblance of control of developing a relationship, not just giving out a card and hoping that you'll hear back from them, because likely in that type of situation, the odds are against you. So those are things to think about. And it's not necessarily you as a person, it's just people are busy and distracted. Don't ask to pick someone's brain. People hate that. They'll do it if they're feeling generous, but people don't have time for that shit. People charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for their time if they're really successful. It's rare. Like, maybe they'll have a business lunch or drink with you if there's some sort of significant payoff for them. But if you're like networking up in the industry, do not ask people for their time to pick their brain. What they might say is, sure, call my assistant and book an hour with me. It's $500 for the hour. But if you want it and it's that important to you, book it and pay it. But I'm not saying I'm not necessarily saying to go and do that. It really depends on the situation. I myself don't currently pay a consultant $500 an hour for that. But I'm just putting this into perspective that people don't like you to ask to pick their brain, because even if they have the best of intentions and they want to, they don't have the time and they're busy. And so you can instead get creative of how you can connect with them instead of just asking them for their free advice that they built up years to develop. So those are some things to get started in thinking. Are there any questions or comments? Let's see, I'm going to the chat here. Let's see. Questions or comments? Okay, well, let me just show you a few other areas that is important, is making a present inventory of your top 10 connections that would have significance in your music career. Know who, it's like getting stock of what is the landscape where you're operating in? Who are the people around you that may be able to open doors for you? But in terms of then working backwards also from where you want to go, do your homework, find out who knows who you know that knows this person. LinkedIn is actually useful for that, because you can find out how many degrees of separation and who you know who's in between. Now, I used to not use LinkedIn, but now a lot of people in the music business really do use LinkedIn. So make sure that your information there is professional. and up to date. Now, know with all of these connections that you're looking to build, these relationships, what do you want? What might you have in common with this person, and what are you intending to do to make this connection? And what do you have to give to this person, the value? So those are some things to think about. Places that are really good to go out and make connections would be at, concerts are good, like when things get back to normal, right? Concerts are good, however, they're loud. People are also there to just have a good time often. So they might not be so into building relationships. Definitely they are, for sure. But things are loud, so you have to think about that. But it's also different events, like an example would be a local meetup group for songwriting. Those are the perfect types of places to make connections. And people are there to meet each other, but it's not like first and foremost saying networking. It's like, let's come together, meet up, and let's talk about songwriting, etc. So it's a slight difference in tone, and it has a different feeling underneath of it. And you want to make sure that you're in places where they have the right feel that you want to go for. Also know that people want to work with their friends. So you have to be chill and fun and someone that people want to work with. It doesn't mean that you have to be someone that you're not. Like if you're not naturally a majorly outgoing person, you don't have to put on a false front. In fact, people can smell it and they won't like it. But people want to just be around people. They want to work with people that are their friends because they're going to be spending time with these people. So that's important. Other things, when you're in touch with people via email, it's still professional email. Make sure that there are no typos. Double check everything before you send it. Make sure you're asking, it's like a sandwich, like how is the person doing? And bring up something, a personal connection. Do some research if you don't know. Then what you need to say, and then the end, tie it with something more personal at the end. Those are always effective. Never say things like, if someone says thank you, never say no problem. People hate that. They're like, oh, I didn't know it was a problem. Since you're welcome. Thank you, you're welcome. Things like that. No problem, or uh-huh, or things like that. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head exactly like that, but that's something to keep in mind. It's still a business at the end of the day, and we're still operating with professional communication, even though it's more casual and cool with music. Like, it's a fun business. Think about it like that. All right, so if you have any other questions, let me know, leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. And if you're watching the replay and you have questions, also do the same. And that's that.